my name is Callie Chappelle and welcome to this video about Adobe Illustrator. So this video is part of a two-part video series all about how to use Adobe Illustrator specifically for science. And it's put on by STAR, Science Teaching Through Art, a Stanford student organization. This workshop was made in 2018 and was part 3 of a 3-part infographic workshop series. So let's jump into it. So I have Adobe Illustrator here open on my computer, and this is Adobe Illustrator Creative Cloud, AICC. If you have Adobe Illustrator CS5 or CS6, it's very, very similar. There's just a couple of things that I might be going over in this video tutorial that you just may not have access to, or things have changed slightly. So first I want to orient you to what Adobe Illustrator looks like. So up here you've got kind of what I like to call the big picture toolbar. And one thing that I wanted to mention, I've got a bunch of handouts that actually go along with this video, so check in the video description to see if there's a link to the handouts there. So up top, I've got, that says QuickTime Player. Now I've got Adobe Illustrator CC. And this is kind of the big picture toolbar. So I've got things like Quit Illustrator, System Preferences, File, so I can get a new document, etc. I can edit particular things, so copy and paste up here if you don't use the hotkeys, Object, Selection Type, and of course the Help window, which you always want to use if you have any questions. Now here on the side, we've got a toolbar, and there's a couple of things that I want to point out here in the toolbar. The first is this selection tool. So the selection tool allows you to select an entire object or a group of objects. Then there's the direct selection tool, which allows you to select parts of an object, like anchor points, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. I'm going to skip down here to the pen tool, which allows you to draw lines and curves. The type tool, which allows you to type things, so type words. Line segment tool, or the arc tool, which allows you to draw lines, or if I push down on the line segment tool and click and hold, I've got the arc tool, and I am using my handy dandy mouse, highly recommended, right, so I can switch it. I've got my rectangle tool that if I hold down and click, I can get the rounded rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, the polygon tool, the star tool, or the flare tool. Very cool, but I'm going to move it back to the rectangle tool. And the shaper tool, which is something that's new in Adobe Illustrator CC. And this actually converts the terrible thing you drew into an actual shape. And I'm going to go through this all in a second. So these are all different tools that you can use, and there's more tools here that I might talk about in a little bit. Now up here is all properties of the thing you drew. Over here are what I like to call general properties toolbar, so things like colors, color swatches, layers, artboards, etc. And I'm going to go through everything that means, but down here, finally, there's a bunch of different zooming options, and my favorite, fit on screen. So this will fit whatever size thing that you have, and it will make it fit on the screen. But let's take a step back and actually walk through how you might make an infographic. So the very first thing that you need to do is actually create a new file. So I'm going to go to File, and New from Template. If I had, actually, no, sorry, not New from Template. I'm actually going to close Adobe Illustrator and reopen it so you can actually see what this looks like if I was just opening it for the first time. This will be important in a second. So I'm going to open Adobe Illustrator, oops, not Adobe Illustrator, and it opens like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Create New, and I'm going to make a new document. All right, so the thing that I'm going to make is an infographic poster, so eventually I'm going to print it. So I'm going to go to Print, and it gives me a bunch of preset options. Now, I'm going to print a poster with very particular dimensions, so I'm going to name my project AI Tutorial, and I'm going to need to modify the size. So this is in points, but I want to determine the size of this poster in inches, and so I'm going to make my poster 30 by 20. So if you're actually in the Adobe Illustrator workshop, those are the dimensions that your poster needs to be. And I'm going to ignore bleed. Essentially what bleed is just a little bit of space on the outside of the thing that you're printing in order for the printer to actually leave room for the ink to quote-unquote bleed. I'm drawing air quotes right now. You can get around this by just doing your design all the way to the edge of the page, and then when you go to print it, select fit to size of paper. That's usually an option when you go to print it, and then you could ignore bleed. It'll make sure that it fits it and it won't cut off the edge of your thing. So that aside, I'm going to create, and you can see that now I've created a document that is 20 inches by 30 inches. So 30 inches wide, 20 inches tall. So the first thing I'm going to actually do is draw a line. So how do I draw a line? I am going to go to the, I'm actually going to draw an arc. I'm going to go to the arc tool, or if it was the line segment tool, I could go to line segment tool, but I'm going to go to the arc tool. And I'm going to click, drag, let go. So you can see that I have now made an arc. Now that I have my arc made, I can show you how the selection tool and the direct selection tool work. So the selection tool allows you to grab the entire arc. All right, so I can click on the arc and I can move it around like this. The direct selection tool allows you to select subsections of that, in this case, line or arc. So you can see if I click on the direct selection tool, I get these 2 points. So these are called anchor points, and these are, in this case, the 2 points that make up your arc. Now, these anchor points can be moved around individually using the direct selection tool. So I can move them like this, and I can also change the curvature of this arc by pulling and moving these handles right here. So that is the selection tool. Again, allows you to select the entire shape, and the direct selection tool, which allows you to specifically modify these handles. Now you can also see that as I move things around, it gives you some points of reference that allow you to line these things up. So let's say that I want to make sure that these 2 anchor points are on the same line, invisible line right here. You can see as I move around the anchor points, it'll show you line extension. All right, so now I've got a nice arc right here. All right, so I just want to make my arc look really pretty. I really like that arc. So now you should understand how to draw and edit lines. Now I want to show you how to actually make a shape. There's 3 different ways that you can make a shape. The first is you can use preset shape tools that are already in Adobe Illustrator. So again, I can go back to the rectangle tool, I can click and hold, and I can make a rectangle. You can see these rectangles have these little circles here. These just allow you to round the rectangles. All right, oops, got all sorts of stuff here. I don't want that. If I want to select that rectangle, I just want to X out of these boxes. I can select the entire rectangle by clicking on the selection tool, and I can just select particular points of the rectangle by clicking on the direct selection tool. I can also make a rounded rectangle this way without doing what I showed you using these little circles here. I can make circles or ovals using the ellipse tool, etc. The second way of making a shape is using the shaper tool, and this is something that's new in CS, in Adobe CC. So let's say that I want to make a circle, but I forgot that I can make a circle using the ellipse tool. I can use it by clicking on the shaper tool here, and I can just draw by holding and clicking down, just like maybe you used MS Paint when you were a kid, or maybe not a kid. I can draw a really terrible circle, hold down, and when I lift up my finger off of the mouse or the keypad, it turns it into a perfect circle. I can do the same thing with an oval. Made an oval. I can do the same thing with a square. So this is really an awesome thing that they implemented in in Adobe CC that makes my terrible drawings fabulous drawings. All right, and then the last thing you can do is actually using join. So I'm going to actually make a heart here, and I'm just moving these guys out of the way so they're not distracting us. So let's say that I want to make this into a heart. So I need to make the other half of the heart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this guy. So again, it's up here, or you can use the hotkeys, Command C. And then I can paste it. I'm just showing you, not using the hotkeys right now because you can't see that I'm using the hotkeys. So I've got 2 of these arcs, and now I want to flip this arc across a vertical reflection. So I'm going to go to transform. So I right-clicked. I got this menu. I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to go to reflect. There's a bunch of other options here. I'm going to go to reflect. I want a vertical reflection. Boom, got a vertical reflection. All right, so now what I can do is I can move around this arc so it lines up here. And let's say that I want this guy to be joined and I just want it to be one heart. I can do this one of 2 ways. The first thing I can do is just by moving this endpoint here. So using the direct selection tool, I can go to the very end of this, I can scoot it down, I can click on this one, I can scoot it down, and I can join it. Another thing I can do is using the join function. So I can click on this arc, I'm going to hold down Shift. So holding down Shift while clicking will allow you to select multiple things at once. So I'm holding the Shift key down and I'm going to click on this arc. All right, so now I've selected on both of these arcs. I'm going to right click and I'm going to hit Join. Now, when I click out of this and click it again, it selects the entire heart. All right, so that is the last method for making a shape. Remember, the first one was using the rectangle tool or specific shape tool is here. The second was using the shaper tool, which is here. And then finally, you can connect multiple individual things that you've drawn and use join. Now that I've made a shape, how do I modify that shape? So we're going to go back up to this toolbar up here on the top. And this function right here allows you to modify the inside of the shape. So it will fill the shape. So right now I've got this little box with the red line. That means don't fill with anything. So if I pick this up and I put it over here, you can see that it's just transparent. There's nothing on the inside. It's empty filled. And then I can select a bunch of different colors here. All right. Another thing you can do is this, which is registration. So you can see if I click registration, the default fill is black. But the thing that's really powerful about registration is you can actually go down to this tool, the eyedropper tool, and you can hover the eyedropper over something else, and it will take on the property and or the color of the thing that you just selected. So that's pretty cool. So this is for fill. This one next to it is for stroke, and that's just the outline. So I can choose different colors of stroke, and here you can actually increase the size of the stroke to different points. So now you can see a little bit better if I change the stroke to orange or to brown or to red or again, back to none. And finally, opacity. So opacity is just a level of transparency. So if I put this over top of this, you can see that as I adjust the opacity, I can adjust the transparency of the fill and also the fill specifically of this object. All right, so these are how you can modify shapes. The next thing I want to introduce you to is the concept of layers. So you may have noticed over here on the side, we've got a little icon right here, and that allows for layers. So if you remember, perhaps you've used layers already in other software, but essentially it's just a bunch of, well, layers that can be piled on top of one another. So imagine that you've got a bunch of pieces of saran wrap and you're layering them on top of one another. If you draw on the very top piece of saran wrap and you draw on the very bottom piece of saran wrap, if you take the top piece of saran wrap and put it over the bottom piece, then you will obscure the thing that's on the top piece of saran wrap will obscure the bottom thing. Same thing for this. So now we've got one layer, but let's say I want to make a new layer. I can go down here, I can select create new layer, and I've got layer 1 and layer 2. Layer 2, I'm just going to rename top layer, and layer 1, I'm going to rename bottom layer. All right, so I've got two different layers. So what happens if I take this heart, and this makes intuitive sense, but if a layer is more near the top of your screen, it will be on top of layers that are more near the bottom of your screen. If I can take this heart that I drew and I can put it on the top layer. So now if I expand my top layer, I've got this path, which I'm going to rename heart. Pro tip, always make sure that you're labeling things with the most descriptive layers. And you can see that it's on a layer that's above this oval. I'm going to rename it oval. Okay, so if I pick up the heart and I move it and drag it on top of the circle or this oval, you can see that the heart is on top of it. Now, if I take the oval, I drag and drop it onto the top layer above the heart. If I click on the oval and I put it on top of the heart, you can see that it is on top of the heart. Oh, just kidding. This oval is actually this oval down here. You can see that this oval that I'm clicking on actually belongs to this thing here, because as I click on it, this little box pops up, but also because this is blue and this is also blue. So I can put this, you can see this is underneath the heart, but this oval, which is this oval up here, is on top of the heart. So I'm going to put it here. You can see it is on top of this heart. So that is how layers work. Now I want to introduce you to the concept of groups. Alright, so how groups work is you can have multiple objects and they can move together as one. So let's say that I want to make a group between this oval and this heart. If I select the heart, I hold down shift and I select the oval, you can see that I've selected both of them at the same time. Let's say that I want to click just one place and select both of them. What I can do is group them. How I group them is by right-clicking after selecting on both of them and touching group or clicking on group. Now if I unclick and then click it, I select both of them at the same time. This is very helpful. The next thing I want to show you how to do is insert a photograph. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually, I'm going to rename these guys. So this is top, I'm going to rename this top shape layer. And I'm going to rename this bottom, bottom shape layer. And now I'm going to create a new layer that is on the very top, and I'm going to name it photo layer. And it's going to be this layer that, unsurprisingly, I'm going to put a photo in. So I'm going to open a browser, so you can see here's my Chrome, and I'm going to go look for a photo. So I don't know what photo I want. Maybe I want a photo of Ryan Gosling. Yeah, Ryan Gosling would make everybody's life better. Alright, so I'm going to go to Images, Ryan Gosling, and let's say that I want to use this photo of Ryan Gosling. Alright, so I want this photo of Ryan Gosling. It's from Wikipedia. I'm going to go to Wikipedia because I'm a good person and I'm going to actually check the copyrights for this photo. And I'm going to scroll down. It looks like it's a Creative Commons license and it was created by Gage Skidmore. I'm going to look at the permission details. It says must attribute to Gage Skidmore if used elsewhere other than on Wikimedia and its projects. We're not using Wikimedia and or its projects, so I need to remember to attribute to Gage Skidmore. And I'm going to save this image. So I'm going to go to Save Image As. I'm going to save it into my downloads, and I'm going to call something that I'll actually remember, Ryan Gosling. Alright, so now I know that this Ryan Gosling picture is saved into my downloads. So I'm going to File, I'm going to go to Place, and now I'm going to go into Downloads, and here's my picture of Ryan Gosling and Place. You don't want to just copy and paste images into Illustrator because if someone tries to open it in a different computer, it's going to get really confused and it's going to forget what that picture actually was. So you want to actually place it and have a special name for it that you'll remember. So if someone, your friend tries to open it, then all those photos will still be accessible. Because they aren't always embedded. And so now I've got photo layer, I've got image, I'm going to rename this something that I'll remember, Ryan Gosling. And you can see that Ryan Gosling's on top of everything else because he is on the top layer. So that is how you can insert photos. Now, a couple of tips for finding good photos. The first thing you want is, because photos are rasters, they will not look very good if you make them really, really, really huge, or if they're not the right size. So one thing that you can do when you're Google searching is go into Tools, Size, and then select large sizes. So like, let's say you're making this really big, you can do larger than 2 MP. You can see this picture is really huge, so this should be good to go. Also, if you have a PNG, it might have transparent elements, which can actually be really nice depending on what you're doing. So just be aware of that. Now, let's say that I don't want the outside of Ryan Gosling to be a rectangle. I want it to be a heart because Ryan Gosling's I find very attractive. So what I can do is I can make what's called a clipping mask. So I'm going to select these guys, and remember they're grouped. I just want the heart, so now I'm going to right click, and instead of it saying group, it says ungroup. So I'm going to click ungroup, and I'm going to have this heart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the heart on top of Ryan Gosling. Except for I have a problem, because when I click away, hey, where'd my heart go? Well, it makes sense because the heart is on a lower level than Ryan Gosling. So what I want to do is I'm going to click and drag the heart into the photo layer, and I'm going to not just drag it onto the photo layer, but I'm going to drag it onto the photo layer on top of Ryan Gosling. So you can see it's on top of Ryan Gosling. I also don't want the heart to be have this white inside. I don't want it to be partially opaque. I want it to be transparent. So I'm going to go back to this one, which is what controls the fill, and I'm going to make it transparent. Now I'm going to select the heart, and I'm going to hold the shift key down and also select this picture. Then I'm going to right click and choose Make Clipping Mask. Bam! Look what happens. It clips the photo, so the thing that's on bottom, and only to be on the inside of the thing that's on top, in the case, this heart. So that is clipping mask. Alright, so now that you know how to use a clipping mask, I want to show you how to actually access graphics that are a little bit more complex and ones that are already made for you. So a really great website is the NEUR Project. You have to, in order to download things from the NEUR Project, you have to have an account, so I'd recommend you making an account. And I can search for a bunch of different icons. So these are all really nice little icons or graphics that you can use. So let's say that I want a graphic of Grumpy Cat. So I'm gonna type in Grumpy Cat and see what comes up. Well, it looks like there's a bunch of graphics of Grumpy Cat. I really like this graphic of Grumpy Cat, and so I want to download it. So I'm gonna hit download, and I can choose PNG or SVG. So PNG would be the raster, and SVG is the vector. So I'm gonna choose SVG, and then I can choose a license, royalty-free. So if I was trying to make some money off this, I need to pay and use the royalty-free, or Creative Commons. I'm not making money off it, and I can't attribute the author, so I'm going to download it. Speaking of attributing the author, I actually need to remember to attribute the author to this Ryan Gosling photo. So 1 second, I'm going to quickly down this. I'm going to re-download this. I'm going to rename it Grumpy Cat, and it's downloaded in my downloads file. So I want to attribute the author. Who was it again? Oh yeah, Gage Skidmore. How am I going to do that? Well, what I can do is I just do a split screen here. I can add text. So in the photo layer, here's my clipping group, I'm going to want to add some text. Well, actually, because it's text, I don't want to put it in the photo layer. I want to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it the text layer. So again, I'm using good practices. I'm creating descriptive layers, and I'm keeping things very organized. So remember, in order to make a text, you're going to go back to the type tool, click on it, and click like this. Just to show you here, well, I'm just going to type in this person's name, so Gage Skidmore. But that's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to make this bigger again. I'm going to select the text, and look, I can make the text different sizes. Because I'm using the selection tool, as I make the text box longer and taller, the text gets longer and taller. As I make it wider, the text gets wider as well. But let's say that I actually want to keep it at the same proportions as it originally was. I'm just going to Control Z so it goes back to what it was. I can do that here. So you can see that my bar, now that I'm on the selection tool and I'm clicking on a text, is different than if I had, say, selected a shape. So if I select the text, there's a bunch of different options. Again, I can, well here, let's move this way. So this one is the size. That's probably the best. So I'm going to actually make the size of the text bigger. So you can see that my proportion's staying the same, but my size is getting bigger. I just wanted to make it bigger so you can see a little bit better. This one is font, so a bunch of different fonts. You can even use downloaded fonts, so this is one that doesn't come standard, but I downloaded. You can have different weights, so condensed italic, bold, etc. Opacity is exactly the same as it was for shapes. And then these are also the same as for shapes. So this is the fill, this is the stroke, so I'm going to increase the stroke to 0.2, and you can see that the stroke color that I have here is, well, was black, now it's blue. I know this looks absolutely terrible, but I'm just trying to show you how this works. And yeah, so there's text. All right, so now we're going to go back to Grumpy Cat. So we've downloaded Grumpy Cat, we've got our Grumpy Cat SVG, and if I go to my Finder and I open Downloads, if I open this SVG file with Adobe Illustrator, you can see that it is indeed a vector. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm just going to go to fit on screen. You can see it's perfectly sized. And now if I select this, you can see that it is indeed a vector. So what I can do is I can copy it. Copy, so Command C if you're on a Mac, Control C if you're on a PC. And now I want to make a new layer, which is going to be my cat layer. Okay, so now I know this one's going to be my cat. And I'm going to go to Edit, I'm going to do Paste in Front, and then you can see, oops, and then you can see that it pasted the cat. Now let's say that I want to make this cat bigger. I can go like this, but again, same with text, I'm going to get really weird distortion. So if I undo that, I just Command Z, Command Z, Command Z until I get back to the proportions that I want. If I hold down the Shift key and now I pull it, you can see that the proportions are maintained. So that is a way for you to download vectors from online in SVG format and be able to use them in your own work. All right, so now what happens if I actually want to save this? So pretty simple. I can go to File, I know, this looks really terrible. I'm just trying to show you what to do. You can go to File, and you can save. So this is how you save the Adobe Illustrator file. So I could save this as Adobe tutorial.ai, hit save. It's going to give me a bunch of different options. The standard's fine, hit OK, and then it'll save it in the folder that you selected. But let's say that I don't want to save it as Adobe Illustrator file. I want to send it to my friend, because my friend loves Gage Skidmore and Ryan Gosling and Grumpy Cat. So I'm going to go back to File, I'm going to go to Export, and Export for Screens. Export as and Save for Web are both legacy from CS5 and CS6. Export for Screens is the most up-to-date one for Adobe Creative Cloud. So don't worry about artboards. I didn't talk about artboards here, but you can do that. I can choose where I want to export it to, so I want to export it to my folder for this workshop. And then I have got a bunch of different file formats I can select for. PNGs, JPEGs are both, these are different options. These are both going to be saving them as rasterized files, and then SVG and PDF are both vectorized files. So essentially what happens is if I want to export it as a JPEG, I don't want to export it as JPEG, I want to export it as a PDF, I can hit Export Artboard, and then it will export it to where I selected. Hopefully this video was helpful for you, and hopefully now you have all the skills you need to make a wonderful scientific infographic or poster. Thanks.